Last year, I made a decision that wasn't very good for my wallet. I spent 300 Australian dollars buying a Dreamcast, and then I spent an additional 300 to get my hands on the Sonic Adventure games. So now that I have some newfound information on how these games played on their intended console, I'm gonna make a video on it. So before I played these games on the Dreamcast, I actually preferred Sonic Adventure over Sonic Adventure 2. But after replaying both of the games, I think I prefer Sonic Adventure 2 now. I think the biggest reason why I preferred Sonic Adventure before was just because I vibed with the general game structure. I loved having the small open world that Sonic and his friends could run around, and I just liked playing as each character individually and having their own separate stories. But after playing the games back to back, while I still prefer Sonic Adventure 1's structure, Sonic Adventure 2 is just overall a lot more polished and focused, in my opinion. Or maybe not in my opinion, I think it's actually true. Because I think the biggest problem with Sonic Adventure was that it was way too ambitious. It had 6 gameplay styles, and that requires a lot of work. One thing I do admire about the early 2000s era for Sonic is that different characters have their own gameplay styles, and I think that was part of the charm, but it also is a problem when it comes to video game development. And that's probably why you don't see a lot of video games with various different gameplay styles, is because it's better to just focus on one and then try to flesh that out as much as possible. Because even though Sonic Adventure 2 has 6 characters, it only has 3 gameplay styles, so there's a bit more fleshing out for each style. And my biggest problem with Adventure 1 is that there just wasn't enough. For example, I do enjoy Amy's stages in the game, but because she only has 3 stages, her gameplay style just didn't have enough time to flourish. I remember there's this upgrade that Amy can get which lets her spin and use her hammer as an attack, but it's just so useless in the game. After gaining the upgrade, I thought there would be like a chance for me to use it, but no, there just wasn't. This of course makes Sonic the best character because he has the most stages, and while his stages start off pretty simple, they get more complex over time, and I started really enjoying them. And once you start replaying the levels and doing the time trial missions, even the earlier levels, which seem pretty simple at first, they start getting complex because you've got to min-max everything. You've got to make sure that you're constantly finding these little shortcuts that you wouldn't normally think of on a normal run. And I think that's something that the newer Sonic games were missing, that Frontiers brought back by encouraging players to get to the end of the stage in a certain amount of time. The only problem is Frontiers was very generous with its time limits, and the physics just aren't as complex as Sonic Adventure. I haven't replayed any of the other characters' missions yet, but I think that's my problem. I think Sonic stages get really good around stage 5, and none of the characters have more than 5 stages. So Sonic's the only character that gets fleshed out. And while, yeah, maybe the game could be really fun from a replay perspective, I think if you go back and play it, it's hard to be charmed by these gameplay styles when you don't have a lot of time with them. Now, I'm not even necessarily saying this is a bad thing, because Sonic Adventure came out in, 1998? And when you were a kid back then, you'd probably have like 1 or 2 games you can play, so you'd play them over and over again. And there you would learn what the game really truly has to offer. But as a modern gamer with so many choices, and if you're a grown-ass man on top of that, you're busy doing your job and all that, you're probably not going to have the time to replay it. And yeah, that's my biggest problem with Sonic Adventure 1, is that it didn't age well in that sense. But with Sonic Adventure 2, I think the game feels very fleshed out by just playing the main story, and it's even better when you replay it, so you have enough incentive from that story to do all the replay stuff. And speaking of stories, I just think Sonic Adventure 2 has a lot more of a banger story. First of all, just through the presentation, because Sonic Adventure 2's cutscenes are fully animated, they're just a lot more engaging to watch compared to Sonic Adventure 1, which has a lot of stock animations and they just use generic mouth flaps to get the characters talking. It's not that engaging. And of course, in Sonic Adventure 1, you see a lot of reused cutscenes as well. You see things from different characters' perspectives, but of course, at the same time, the same thing is happening. And because there's 6 different stories, there's a lot of repetition. Adventure 2's story is also a lot deeper and complex. Adventure 1, if you lay it all out, it's pretty simple, but because of how it's presented, it can be quite complex in that sense. And I do think Adventure 1 also excels because it gives every character an arc, excluding Sonic, obviously. Whereas in Adventure 2, I feel like Shadow and Rouge are the only ones that have arcs. Eggman might have some kind of epiphany at the end about his grandfather, but I wouldn't really call it an arc. Tails obviously goes through his Be Brave arc, which is pretty awesome, which is awesome and cute. Again, it's nothing too complex, he just gets separated from Sonic and then realizes, I gotta do something myself, I gotta be my own man. Amy of course goes through a similar arc, but she also gets to display her, empathy, I guess? Her woman empathy? Because she's constantly being chased by this robot, so she figures that maybe I have to do this myself. I've gotta defeat the robot defeat him myself, kill the robot myself, and then she does that. She kills the robot herself. But what's interesting about Amy is that she starts off by chasing Sonic, but when she meets Birdie, she realizes there are more important things than chasing Sonic, and then she tries to reunite this bird with their family. I also realize Big doesn't have an arc, but he's just there, bro. He's just chilling. He's kind of like Sonic, just doing his own thing. People hate on Big. I love Big. Big is a homie. Knuckles' arc is interesting. It's a lot more subtle, but what basically happens is that when the Master Emerald breaks, he obviously has to prioritize finding it, despite getting different flashbacks to, you know, his ancestors. I think as he sees the flashbacks, he kind of realizes that his ancestors were kind of messed up and maybe he doesn't want to learn about them. He literally says at the end that it might just be better if he didn't know the full story behind his ancestors. So Knuckles basically finds peace in guarding the Master Emerald. I mean, Eggman's trying to steal it again, it has to be done. And because Eggman freed Tikal and she's been showing him the flashbacks, Knuckles just kind of realizes this just ain't for me. And obviously we have the big one, which is E102 Gamma, literally just peak Sonic Adventure writing. I remember playing Adventure 1 for the first time as an early teenager, and like just Gamma's story just left me speechless. I was like, wait, what? At that point in my life, I hadn't played many Sonic games. It's like how I was saying how kids only had a few games and played them over and over again. That was me and Sonic. I loved Sonic, but I only had access to a few games. And the main ones was Sonic Rush and Sonic Unleashed, which, you know, were good, but the story wasn't that crazy dark. And even though I had watched Sonic X, I don't know how, like, this went over my head. Maybe it was just like the poor dub. Or maybe it was just recontextualizing everything by making me play as Gamma. And that's why I love Sonic, because it takes this mascot cartoon character that looks like it's just for kids, but it makes sure that you know it can be a lot more than that. Gamma's story made me think about this line from Sonic Colors, where Cubot jokes about how it's technically gruesome from a robot's point of view to clean up dismembered robot parts. It's kind of like if humans were cleaning up dismembered hands and limbs, you know, that'd be disgusting. But it's just played off as a silly joke, it means nothing to them. But when E102 Gamma sees his brothers being disassembled, it is gruesome to him. He is traumatized by it. And I was thinking like, dang, they don't make Sonic stories like they used to anymore, huh? And then when E102 Gamma realizes that there are animals trapped inside these bodies, he decides to kill his own brothers in order to save what really matters, what's truly alive. I think Gamma's story was the first time I felt any emotion ever from any form of media. Because when I was younger, usually when I played or watched the story, even if it was sad, I wouldn't really be too emotional about it. Like, it's just fake, guys. And Gamma's story didn't have me bawling or anything, it didn't have me tear up, but I did feel something. That was like the spark of emotions. I finally learned emotions. Now, Chaos is a pretty cool character. Again, it's very simple. It's just that he had the Chow, and then the Knuckles clan killed the Chow, and now he's mad. And I think they kind of butchered the end, I'm not going to lie, because Sonic's all like, I mean, I guess, I don't know, it's like a gameplay thing. It's like Sonic neutralized Chaos. That's the idea, that's how the story went. But in the gameplay, he's literally just physically attacking Chaos, like that's not neutralizing. I think the ending would also benefit from a scene where everyone who's not Sonic go and kind of collect a bunch of Chow to show Chaos that, you know, everything's okay. We're now living in a time of peace. Because they just kind of coincidentally show up to the battle, and then that also helps Chaos find peace. I think 100% though, I still love Sonic Adventure. Like, it has its quirks, but it's still awesome. This is a 1998 game. Remember that, guys. You know, if you played Super Mario 64, you're gonna get like a solid game, and that's it. But Sonic Adventure changes lives. But of course, Sonic Adventure 2 did whatever Sonic Adventure 1 was doing a lot better. I think it's funny how Shadow and Chaos have very similar motivations. Basically, people / Chow that they cared about were killed because of a power-hungry group. But of course, Shadow is a speaking character. He can talk, so his emotions are a lot more more complicatedly conveyed, and Shadow's past is a lot more mysterious. Tikal could show everyone flashbacks of what happened, but we're not 100% sure what happened to Shadow, what Shadow even is, in fact. And while people complain that there are a lot of unexplained parts in the story, that was really intentional, guys, because at the end of the game, you know, Rouge asks questions, Eggman asks questions, and they just aren't answered. Instead, they're told to not even focus on that and just focus on the present, on what they were able to accomplish today. I think Rouge is an amazing character because she's thematically relevant to Shadow's story, but also has some subtle character development. And that's probably because people don't understand Sonic Adventure 2's story. They hear that Rouge is a government spy and then suddenly she's like a good guy. But Rouge was like a bad person from the beginning. She's not a government spy. I mean, she's spying for the government, but she's not a government-owned spy. As you get my drift, she's not employed under the government. This is a one-time contractual deal. So when people complain that Rouge doesn't care about Prison Island being blown up, they don't realize that Rouge actually has no reason to care. She's a terrible, selfish person. She's the type of person that Shadow would despise. In fact, Rouge probably helps rationalize Shadow his hatred for Earth, because his only good interactions have been with who? Nobody except for Sonic. Eggman wants to take over the Earth, he's selfish. Rouge is selfish, he's the infamous jewel thief. He stole from the bank and everyone's just now attacking him and shooting at him and sending bombs down to him. And out of all these characters, Rouge is the only one to get that character arc that makes her a good person. She's living proof for Shadow that Earth is worth preserving. Because like Amy said, there are a lot of bad people, but at the end of the day, they're just trying to live, they're just trying to be happy. And that's what Rouge is doing, she's just trying to be happy through her jewels. But of course, it's a very shallow happiness. But through Knuckles' selfless actions, she learns that maybe it is just nice to not be a terrible person. People can basically be redeemed and they should be judged for who they are right now rather than who they were in the past. And that also technically applies to Shadow as well, because he's trying to kill everyone. But then once Shadow realizes that he was wrong, Sonic accepts him back very openly, with no questions asked. So Adventure 2 is basically just an overall stronger narrative than Adventure 1, and it still stands as the best Sonic story in the game, although it's not like they've had many chances to one-up it. So I prefer the gameplay in Adventure 2, and I prefer the story in Adventure 2. What else do it's the music. I prefer the music. Now, I'm not saying the music is better, but I prefer it. And again, it's thanks to Rouge and Shadow actually, because Rouge introduces jazz, and I really like jazz. And Shadow introduces his weird grunge metal thing. I don't know what's going on, but it's very emotional and edgy. And it just works so well as an idea because the lyrics in his songs are all muffled up. You can barely hear them. But that's awesome because it's so thematically relevant to what's going on with Shadow, because he just woke up from cryostasis. His memories had been tampered with. So these songs all make Shadow a deeper character than he's already presented as in the story. In these adventure games, every character just has one theme, but Shadow, he has like 5. So I'm not really saying that the music is better in Adventure 2, but it does tie into the story a lot better than Adventure 1. And I'm also just a lot more emotionally attached to Live and Learn now. Like, I used to prefer Open Your Heart, and maybe from an instrumental perspective I still kind of do, but Live and Learn just ties into Shadow, and I care a lot more about Shadow, unfortunately, than I care about Chaos, because Chaos isn't really much of a character. He has an arc, sure, but because he's basically just an animal, he doesn't really go through any complex arcs. I still love both games though, and with Adventure 1 you really need to go into it not expecting a timeless classic, but you need to put yourself into the headspace of a kid from 1998. Like, the graphics of Adventure aren't that crazy today, but I'm sure they were insane for the time they came out. I'm sure they chose Chaos to be a water monster because they wanted to show the cool water effects the Dreamcast could do. And of course you have the transforming tornado as well, which doesn't look cool nowadays, but it probably blew minds back then. It's kind of like 2001 A Space Odyssey. Like, you watch it and there's these visual effects and they don't look that impressive now, but back in the day when it came out, they were crazy. This movie isn't really crazy now. Like, I watch it now and I'm literally boring. But I can also appreciate it from the sense that this was early cinema. These were, for its time, mind-blowing visual effects, and the story was pretty original, maybe. I don't know. Although I'm not gonna lie, the story does kind of drag and get confusing, which is something that Adventure doesn't do, which makes it better than 2001 Space Odyssey. And of course, Sonic Adventure 2 has its kinks as well, and not in a fetish type of way. I mean, like, kinks in the system. I mean, like, like, the story is so ambitious. I think it needed a better writer alongside Shiro Maekawa. Like I said, Adventure is a very simple story, so its writing doesn't need to be that crazy good. But because Shiro Maekawa had such a big, deep vision that it kind of needed a better writer. Obviously, Adventure 2 is a Maekawa story. He came up with all the ideas, so he needs to be there for the development of the story. But it'd be nice if there was a professional writer by his side so they can flesh everything out together. Adventure 2 also really likes just using one button for whatever reason, and that is one of its biggest issues. Like, you might be trying to do a cool move and then you just end up slowing yourself down. Adventure 2 would really benefit from a remaster. I don't know why they just ported the game to PC. They didn't change anything. And that's probably the biggest problem with Adventure 2, at least the biggest thing that scares people away from it. Because the controls aren't... It's a bit of a downgrade, actually. Sure, you don't have to charge up the light speed dash, but it's at the risk of doing a somersault. And that's probably why a significant amount of people prefer Adventure 1. It's a lot more predictable. You know what you're doing. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say. I want an Adventure remake and I want an Adventure 2 remake. I'm really glad I bought the Dreamcast because I've never owned a Sega console before. And it's nice knowing that I get to experience these games, which are personal favorites of mine, as God intended, instead of playing the botched PC port. Now, obviously, I could have just emulated it, but because the Dreamcasts have their little Tamagotchis built into the controllers, I just had to buy it. Although it is a little inconvenient trying to get batteries for them, it's a bit silly. Now I just need a CRT TV so I can not only play it as God intended, but also see it as God intended. But yeah, if you somehow made it all the way here, like the video please. Please smash that like button, as they say. And subscribe, maybe. You might also want to check out my other channel, TrueBlue. It is a much more higher production channel that I am putting a lot of time into, so please look at that channel.